When I woke up from the car accident, what greeted me wasn't my wife's worried tears, but a string of icy sarcasm. The hospital room door was shoved open without any courtesy, and Annie walked in, radiating coldness from head to toe. She spared only a single glance at me, lying there in the hospital bed with my head wrapped in gauze, then immediately looked away and settled onto the sofa in the corner, as if she owned the place. Next time, don't bother with this kind of stunt. The cost outweighs the payoff. Her tone dripped with extreme impatience. Long before she arrived, a friend who'd come to visit had already filled me in on the state of our marriage. I took a deep breath and, braving her frosty expression, spoke up. Annie, I've lost my memory. Her face flickered with brief surprise, then twisted into a mocking smile. What kind of game are you playing now? A billion-yuan martial arts wager? You've been reading too many of those trashy novels. Do you think I'm an idiot? She didn't believe me. That was expected. After all, I'd heard that the two of us had been at each other's throats for the past couple of years. If I were in her shoes, I'd think the other person was putting on an act too. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, too tired to argue with her. Fortunately, the doctor standing nearby couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled out my brain's CT scans and bluntly explained my condition to her. The more Annie listened, the more unreadable her expression became. Finally, she turned her head back toward me and fixed me with an intense stare. How much have you forgotten? Our eyes met, and for no reason at all, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Quietly, I answered, I forgot that we're married. Annie stared at me hard for a few seconds, and then, unbelievably, she let out a furious laugh. You're telling me you forgot how you swooped in at my lowest moment and forced me to marry you? Forgot how, over these last 2 years, you've used every trick in the book to try and make me love you? Linbai, you've really outdone yourself. Annie looked like she was about to lose her mind. My friend had only mentioned that things between us weren't great, but he'd definitely left out this part. I hadn't expected that 2 years ago. I'd actually pulled the kind of overbearing CEO forced love act you only see in dramas. I quietly studied Annie, chiseled features, thin lips pressed tightly together. Hers was definitely an aggressively striking, coldly beautiful face. No wonder I'd gone down the forceful route. That kind of face really does inspire a sense of possessiveness. Too bad the current me wasn't the unhinged lunatic from 2 years ago. I still had a shred of basic human decency left in me. I stayed silent for a long time, waiting until Annie's emotions had settled a little, before cautiously speaking up. I am sorry. I've already heard about what's happened between us. Annie let out a cold scoff. What things? The things where you played me like a puppet on a string? The face was undeniably gorgeous, but that mouth was just as undeniably venomous. She left me completely tongue-tied. I steeled myself and pressed on. I agree to a divorce. After we divorce, I'll compensate you as much as I can. Do you want cash or shares? I'd assumed that hearing me say this would make her feel like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, maybe even prompt her to set off firecrackers in celebration. But to my surprise, Annie only got angrier. She froze for a moment, her face instantly turning terrible, and stared at me with an expression of sheer disbelief, grinding her back teeth as she bit out each word. Divorce? Are you trying to drive me to my grave? What gives you the right to say we get married and then just say we get divorced? Let me tell you something, Linbai. Don't even think about it. You'll never be rid of me in this lifetime. Even if I fall for someone else, it won't matter. I will never make room for another person. She fired off all of this with aggressive intensity, but toward the end, the rims of those stubborn eyes began to redden ever so slightly. I was instantly thrown off balance, and hurriedly took back what I'd said. I was just talking off the top of my head. If you don't want a divorce, that's fine too. Annie immediately turned her face away, still stubborn. Who says I don't want one? I sighed helplessly. Some deep-seated survival instinct kicked in, and I instinctively started coaxing her. All right, I'm the one who doesn't want a divorce. I'm the one who can't live without you. I'm the one who'll regret it after my memory comes back and end up on my knees begging you to remarry me. At that, Annie whipped her head around and shot me a fierce glare. I sighed inwardly. It figures, doesn't it? Soothing a woman is exhausting. More exhausting than getting into a car accident. On the drive back, Annie sat in the passenger seat without saying a word. Meanwhile, I finally pieced together in my head the full story I'd cobbled together from my friend's bits and pieces. In simple terms, it went like this. I fell for Annie at first sight and immediately launched an intense pursuit, but she firmly rejected me. As fate would have it, her family was hit by a bankruptcy crisis at just that moment. So I seized the opportunity to strike, cut off every last escape route for her family, and used that as leverage to force her into marrying me. Which is why, for 2 years of marriage, she'd never given me a single good look. What a sin. How did I ever lose my head and decide to follow in the footsteps of those forceful romance novel leads? And what was even more sinful was that, right now, looking at Annie's ice-cold face, I actually felt my heart skip a beat. I forcefully shoved those unhealthy thoughts out of my head and resolved to turn over a new leaf and become a better man. Once we got home, Annie acted as if I were invisible. The thought of lying in the same bed with her that night made my shameless heart flutter again. But then I caught sight of that keep your distance or else cold expression on her face, and my heart instantly went cold. Forget it. A forced melon isn't sweet. I grabbed a pillow and a thin blanket from the wardrobe, ready to make my exit, but ran straight into Annie just as she stepped out of the bathroom after her shower. A vision of spring. Glistening droplets of water traced a path down her slender neck, sliding all the way down before disappearing into the tantalizingly deep V-neck line of her bathrobe. Damn it. 2 years ago, I was eating this well. I swallowed hard and wrenched my head to the side. I know you don't want to sleep with me. I'll take the guest room. I turned to bolt, but before I could get 2 steps, someone blocked my path. Annie stood silently in front of me. The lingering warmth from her shower mixed with some kind of intoxicating, alluring fragrance, threading its way around me in gossamer strands. Lin Bai, I feel the need to remind you, you're not allowed to sleep in the guest room. That's your own household rule. Annie stood before me, her gaze playful. I froze for a second, then caught on. Unwilling to lose face, I tried to claw back some dignity. If I set the rule and you follow it, then clearly you're just in denial about what you really want. Annie's expression didn't flicker in the slightest. Instead, she pressed closer, step by step, her tone even tinged with self-mockery. That's because you, young Master Lin, once told me that if I ever slept in the guest room, you'd pull your investment from my family. Well, that was pretty rotten of me. 2 years ago, my bag of tricks was quite extensive. So consumed with guilt I couldn't even look at her. I stiffly explained, that was a rule specifically for you. I'm the one who made the rule. It's fine if I sleep in the guest room. I was just about to beat a hasty retreat when Annie grabbed me hard and yanked me onto the bed. I don't want you dredging this up and settling old scores with me after you get your memory back. She tossed out the words coldly, pulled the blanket over herself, and lay down with her back to me. I hesitated for a few seconds, then finally gave in and lay down beside her. Too much had happened today. Physically and mentally drained, I sank into a deep sleep before long. The next morning, I woke up in Annie's arms. All those nights spent scrolling through short videos, collecting beautiful wife comments under clips of pretty women. They hadn't been for nothing. Sure, the journey had been bumpy, but the current result was pretty damn satisfying. I was just about to nuzzle deeper into her embrace when Annie's ice-cold voice floated down from above my head. Even with amnesia, you don't forget to take advantage of me. Caught red-handed by the person in question, I was so mortified I didn't know where to put my hands and feet. I scrambled out of her arms at lightning speed. She caught the movement, let out a soft scoff, and got out of bed on her own. Watching her retreating figure, I silently cursed in my head. You used to curse me to my face. Is this all the guts you've got now? Annie tossed the remark over her shoulder, without even turning around. Seen through yet again, I bristled with humiliation. You're just too stubborn to appreciate anything good. Instead of getting angry, Annie actually smiled. She turned around to look at me, and there was even a hint of amusement curling at the end of her words. You used to curse me exactly like that too. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes you really can't judge a person by their face alone. If all you saw in Annie was that face, wasn't that just the same as willingly bringing home a living ancestor to worship? Sitting at the dining table, I suddenly remembered something. I looked across at Annie, who hadn't said a word, and after a moment's hesitation, I spoke. Where's our marriage certificate? I want to take a look. Annie's hand, holding the spoon, paused briefly. Then, without a change in expression, she answered, Torn up. Torn up? She lifted her head to look at me, her gaze just as cold as ever. Why else? So I could look at it every time and be reminded of the fact that you forced me into this marriage. I was instantly struck speechless. After finishing my meal in sullen silence, I couldn't wait to pick up my phone and vent to my friend Xingchen. Normally, Xingchen couldn't stand any of the women around me, but this time, he completely broke character and didn't follow my lead in cursing her out at all. Xingchen, just muddle through. What else can you do? Get a divorce? I think you two, this pure hate couple, are actually both enjoying yourselves in it. Honestly, I kinda ship you two. What the hell are you shipping? I sent him 6 dots, somewhat speechless. I was just about to call him on video to keep complaining when a sudden racket broke out downstairs. I went down and saw a woman with dyed blonde hair grinning cheekily as she spoke to Annie, while Annie still wore that same dead fish expression. Seeing this, a sense of balance was instantly restored in my heart. Maybe it wasn't just me Annie couldn't stand. Maybe she had a congenital facial muscle defect. The blonde woman spotted me, immediately sidled over, and greeted me with extreme familiarity. Brother-in-law, I heard you got into a car accident, lost your memory, and want to divorce Annie. What a coincidence. I just happen to be a divorce lawyer. You two don't even need to go looking for one. I've delivered myself right to your doorstep. I could see it now. The current job market for law graduates really was brutal. Lawyers were already going door to door pitching their services. I walked over with genuine interest as she introduced herself. The woman was called Bai Yue, and her personality was the polar opposite of Annie's. Witty, humorous, and silver-tongued. Listening to her pitch her services with boundless enthusiasm for over 10 minutes, I genuinely started to consider signing up for a divorce package with her. Brother-in-law, our firm is running a promotion right now. Divorces this month are 12% off, and since we're old acquaintances, I'll give you 50% off. 50% off. Who wouldn't be tempted by that? But our marriage certificate was torn up. Would we need to get a replacement first for the divorce? I asked seriously. Bai Yu looked at me with some confusion, then turned to look at Annie. Didn't Annie take your marriage certificate and put it in a safe? The password is even your wedding anniversary. She complained to me about it back then, said you forced her to do it. What? Wait a second. Why did I feel like another pot of crap had just been inexplicably dumped on my head? I whipped my head toward Annie in utter shock. A flash of panic darted through her eyes, but she quickly returned to normal, and in a tone of extreme indifference she said woodenly, You told me to put it in. I didn't listen. I tore it up directly. Bai Yu looked at her meaningfully, the corner of her mouth lifting into an all-knowing smile. The look Annie shot back at her carried a faint undercurrent of murderous intent and warning. Bai Yu fought hard to suppress her laughter, turned back to me, and diligently answered my question. If the marriage certificate really was torn up, you just need to get a replacement first, and then you can proceed normally with the divorce. I nodded subconsciously. Annie's expression visibly darkened. She looked extremely displeased. You actually want a divorce? Lin Bai, tell me yourself. From the moment you woke up until now, how many times have you brought up divorce? What, so now isn't like back when you were scheming every way you could to get me to marry you? It hasn't even been 2 full years, and your heart's changed that fast. This was more than just a little displeasure. This was massive displeasure. The woman I'd chosen with my own eyes, so I'd just have to grit my teeth and swallow the pain. I casually brushed her off with some placating words. Don't be upset, I was just asking. I didn't say I wanted a divorce. Who's upset? Annie raised her volume, in a painfully transparent attempt to cover up, jerking her head away hard, but her cheeks flushed pink against her will. Bai Yu watched the show unfold, with relish from the sidelines. Perhaps feeling that the dramatic tension still needed a little extra push, she casually tossed another log onto the fire. Look at you two, fighting every single day. Fight enough, and fate eventually wears thin. Why not just get it over with now? I'll give you 70% off, and I guarantee neither of you gets the short end of the stick in the asset division. Before she'd even finished speaking, Annie grabbed an orange from the fruit bowl on the coffee table and hurled it at her with vicious force. If you don't shut that mouth of yours right now, believe me, I'll give you a 70% discount on a full set of broken bones. Bai Yu weighed her career ambitions against self-preservation for a few seconds, then made an extremely smooth and swift exit. After Bai Yu left, Annie seemed to have gotten over her anger, but then she started hovering around me constantly, pacing back and forth, deliberately making noise every now and then. I was utterly baffled. I had no idea what new game this living ancestor was playing this time, so I had no choice but to text Xingchen for help. Xingchen instantly replied with a sweating Huangdo emoji, then forwarded me a forum post. Help! Why does my newly adopted cat keep meowing? The comment section below was a wild garden of responses, casting flirty glances for a blind man to see. Because you can't judge a book by its cover. A cat's appearance. After reading for ages, I was still thoroughly confused. So why exactly does it keep meowing? On the other end, Xingchen had clearly lost all patience with my hopelessly dense skull. He shot back a 10-second voice message, absolutely raging. Read fewer novels. What's the use of a head full of theories if you never put them into practice? Now while you've got the amnesia excuse, just pounce on her and pin her down. Even if your memory comes back later and she tries to run, just lock her up. The fatal mistake was that I hadn't turned off my speaker. By the time I realized what kind of wild, unhinged words she'd just roared out, it was already too late. Annie stopped in her tracks and looked at me meaningfully. A suspicious flush colored her cheeks. Looking closely, there even seemed to be a faint glimmer of anticipation hidden in those eyes that she was trying so hard to keep composed. I hurriedly pushed that dangerous thought out of my head. The car accident really did leave some after effects. I was already hallucinating. Annie toyed with the water glass in her hand, let out a soft scoff and said casually, "After 2 years of pretending, you finally can't hold it in anymore?" She slowly advanced toward me. I backed away instinctively until there was nowhere left to go, and my back was pressed flat against the wall. Annie stood before me, tilting her head up slightly to look down at me, her red lips parting. "Lin Bai, if you've got the guts, go ahead and try locking me up." I felt like I really needed to go to the hospital and get my head thoroughly checked. She was clearly threatening me in the iciest tone possible, but why did I keep getting the feeling she was actually hinting at something? Hinting that I should hurry up and put those words into action. Even weirder was that after threatening me with all that tough talk, Annie's mood visibly improved. I racked my brain and still couldn't figure out what she meant, so once again I went to ask Xingchen. Xingchen fell silent on the other end for a good dozen seconds, then replied with something completely off topic. "Have you ever seen one of those legendary tsundere gloomy female ghosts from the folktales? If you have, then congratulations, you've got one living in your house right now." Seriously, had my brain actually broken over the last couple of days? First, she forwarded some incomprehensible forum post, and now she was spouting crazy talk I couldn't understand. But right now, I couldn't care less whether she was human or ghost. What I wanted to know more was, had she actually torn up our marriage certificate or not? Sometimes I really couldn't tell whether it was me forcing Annie to stay at home, or whether she just naturally loved being a homebody. For days on end, as long as I was around, she was there too, giving me absolutely zero opportunity to search for that safe Bai Yu had mentioned. As time passed, the look in Annie's eyes when she looked at me shifted from anticipation to confusion. It was as if her gaze was silently accusing me. Why haven't you made a move yet? Clearly, I was the one who'd been in the car accident, so how come it felt like hers was the brain that was broken? After the 101st time of frantically hinting at me and failing, Annie finally cracked. She decided to set foot outside the house. Bai Yu and the others invited me out for drinks tonight. Before I could even respond, she quickly piled on a bunch of extra words on her own. "Of course, it's fine if you don't want me to go, but don't use the investment to threaten me. Forget it. If you really won't let me leave the house, I can skip it too." Seeing that she was genuinely about to take the easy way out and not go, I immediately raised my voice. Go. Of course you should go. After days of waiting, I'd finally gotten my chance for her to leave the house. Once Annie had my permission, her face instantly turned even fouler than before. She grabbed her car keys and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Once I was certain she was gone, I immediately launched a carpet search of the house. I scoured a huge area and found nothing. In the end, only the underground wine cellar remained. I walked in with zero expectations, only to stumble upon a safe tucked away in a hidden corner. I entered our wedding anniversary. With a beep, the safe clicked open. Inside, there were no gold or jewels, only 2 marriage certificates, lying there all alone. The covers had even been meticulously fitted with transparent protective sleeves. The thunderous pounding of my heart was clearly audible in the cramped space, and along with that pounding, the sealed-away memories surged into my brain like a tidal wave. From the car accident until now, all the doubts, all the guesses. At this moment, they finally settled into certainty. The truth was, on the day of the car accident, I had decided to go home and have it all out with Annie once and for all. But I got into the accident before I even made it home. When I lost consciousness and my awareness was just beginning to drift back, I hazily heard someone sobbing quietly at my bedside. Then, a scalding tear fell onto the back of my hand. I forced my eyes open just a crack and saw Annie clutching my hand tightly with both of hers. Her eyes were shot through with dense red veins. That woman who was always so icy toward me. Her gaze was finally no longer cold. It was filled with fear, with worry, and with an undeniable, impossible to ignore sense of caring. In that moment, I seemed to finally understand. It seemed she actually liked me. I've never been good at handling emotions. That's why back then, when I was attracted to Annie's face, I just went ahead and confessed straightforwardly. When I heard someone wanted to keep her as a sugar baby, I immediately struck first, stopped at nothing, and forced her into marrying me. But after the wedding, I was at a complete loss. Didn't know how to treat her. I'd always thought she hated me, even despised me. But it turned out that didn't seem to be the case. Before I completely blacked out, what flashed through my mind was the image of her always staying by my side when I was sick, the way her gaze unconsciously followed me in photos, all the little moments over these 2 years that I had overlooked. She must like me. I had originally planned to have a proper talk with her once I was fully awake, but I never expected that Annie was such a top-tier actress, wearing 2 completely different faces in front of others and behind closed doors, clearly rushing to see me with red-rimmed eyes at the very first moment. But the second I actually woke up, she put on an act as if she'd just gotten there, looking as impatient as humanly possible. Fine, if she wanted to play act, then I'd play along and go even bigger. I'd keep it up until she couldn't hold her ground anymore, until her true feelings had nowhere to hide, until this stubborn, tight-lipped little mute personally opened her mouth and said she loved me. I took the marriage certificates out of the safe and deliberately placed them in a spot that was impossible to miss. Just as I finished putting them in place, Bayou suddenly sent me the location of a bar. I seriously can't stand watching you two crawl along at this snail's pace anymore, so this lawyer is going to personally step in and push things along. When you get here, don't come in right away. Let me know first. I was a little curious what kind of tricks Bayou could have up her sleeve. When I got to the bar, I stood outside the private room and sent her a message. Bayou didn't reply, but the very next moment, her voice rang out from inside the room, loud enough that she might as well have been using a megaphone for everyone to hear. Annie, I'm asking you one thing today. Do you like Lin Bai or not? Standing outside the door, I sucked in a sharp breath. Seriously, was this opening move really coming with zero build-up at all? Though the approach was ridiculously blunt and crude, I still felt an inexplicable surge of nerves. Inside the room, Annie was silent for a few seconds, then let out a scoff dripping with disdain. Like him? How is that even possible? I obviously hate him. My heartbeat plummeted. But Bayou seemed to have anticipated she'd say exactly that. Her voice was thick with sarcasm as she spoke. Sis, you've been brainwashing yourself for 2 years now. Enough's enough. Every day, your mouth says you hate him, but secretly, behind everyone's back, falling in love with him hasn't been easy, has it? What exactly are you hating? Hate and hate and hate. All you're really hating is that he doesn't love you that much. Her other friends also started chiming in from the sidelines, fueling the fire. Yeah, I think Lin Bai's feelings for you are pretty average. I've never even seen you on his moments. You said he lost his memory. Maybe he's gotten bored and wants a replacement? That's just human nature after all. These words, each one a sharp thorn, finally struck Annie's most vulnerable spot with deadly precision and made her completely break down. You're all talking nonsense. How could he possibly not love me? Annie's voice trembled slightly, but it carried a stubbornness that was all in, holding nothing back. I'm the one he seized by force and plunder, the one he schemed with every trick in the book to force into marriage. There's no way he doesn't love me. Standing outside that door, my eyes suddenly burned hot. When I first started pursuing Annie, she asked me why. I pretended to be shallow and said, because I like your face. When I proposed marriage to her, she asked me why with red-rimmed eyes. Too proud to show my true feelings, I said, because I can't accept losing. From the very beginning until now, I'd finally remembered this critically important piece that I had kept overlooking all along. It seemed I had never once, firmly and unequivocally, said to her, I like you. I didn't hesitate any longer. I pushed open the door to the private room. Annie had already lost count of how many drinks she'd had. She had a strong tolerance for alcohol. I knew that, so when she looked up at me, her eyes were still startlingly clear. She didn't seem to expect that I'd suddenly show up, and she struggled to suppress the violently leaping flame of surprise, flickering in the depths of her eyes. I walked over and took the initiative to explain. I was worried about you, so I asked by you for the address. Annie fought hard to keep the corners of her mouth from curving up and, feigning complete indifference, and even a touch of annoyance, complained, "What's there to worry about? Of course I was going to come home. There's no need for you to keep such a tight leash on me." But I still caught the undisguisable trace of pride seeping through her tone. My appearance clearly sparked immense curiosity in everyone else. The moment I sat down beside her, Annie's friends started bombarding me with questions from all sides. "Brother-in-law," Annie said, "you were the one who shamelessly chased after her back then. Is that true?" Looking at Annie's face as she struggled to keep her composure, I nodded solemnly. The corners of Annie's mouth began to climb uncontrollably. "And she said you used every means possible to force her into marrying you. Is that true too?" I nodded again. Annie's smile kept climbing, and the light in her eyes was alarmingly bright. "And that you force her to be home before 10 every night, and that she has to report to you whoever she goes out to meet. Is that true too?" My heart lurched violently. Since when had I ever forced her to do any of that? Just how many giant controlling freak smears had Annie been slinging onto me behind my back? I couldn't help but glare at her. She finally, somewhat guiltily, averted her eyes and pretended to study the glass in her hand. Everyone in the room was staring at me with the ravenous gleam of hungry wolves, waiting for my answer. I took a deep breath, gritted my teeth, and swallowed this blame whole. That's right. I forced her to do all of that. If I could, I'd even lock her up at home for the rest of her life. The moment the words left my mouth, everyone present collectively sucked in a breath of cold air. Among all that cold air, Annie's reaction was completely different from everyone else's. The others were terrified, but Annie? Annie was turned on. Bai watched from the sidelines, seeing through everything but saying nothing, her shoulders shaking from the effort of holding back her laughter. Annie glanced down at her watch, then very naturally picked up my jacket, which had been draped to the side, and stood beside me, signaling for us to leave. "We just got here. How about staying a bit longer? Someone tried to keep us." Annie let out a cold scoff and shot me a glance. "Don't even try to entrap me. There are 20 minutes left until 10, and it takes 18 minutes to get home from here. Who knows what methods he'd use to torment me if I accidentally get back late." I was almost laughing from sheer frustration. So all these rumors over the past 2 years about me being some Bentai controlling freak, she'd been the one spreading them herself the whole time. Annie silently urged me with her eyes. I had no choice but to get up and play along, saying goodbye to everyone. She walked ahead of me, but I could clearly tell she was deliberately slowing her pace to wait for me. A sudden impulse to tease her roses up in me. Lowering my voice, I murmured by her ear, "Having to wait for me when we walk. Did I force you to do that too?" Annie's body stiffened for a split second at my words. Having had her secret thoughts exposed, she began storming ahead faster out of sheer flustered fury. Watching her indignant figure retreat, I found it more and more amusing. When I caught up to Annie moments later, I found an unwelcome guest standing beside her. I knew that person. She'd pursued me before, and after I rejected her, she found out I liked Annie, and even went after Annie behind the scenes. I didn't know what she was saying to Annie, but both sides looked ready to draw swords, and neither had a pleasant expression. I strode over quickly and arrived just in time to hear that woman pointing at Annie's nose and sneering. "Aren't you just a caged canary? Living off your looks. Sooner or later, Lin Bai will toss you aside." Hearing this, instead of getting angry, Annie actually smiled. "With a face like yours, you definitely couldn't make a living this way. I've got a husband taking care of me. What business is it of yours?" I'd bet anything that if Annie had a tail, it would be sticking straight up to the sky right about now. The woman was left speechless, then turned her head and spotted me. Seeing that Annie hadn't been provoked, she started trying to drive a wedge from my end instead. "Lin Bai, you'd better look into this carefully. Everyone knows the An family is thriving now. They're even about to surpass the Lin family. Don't end up being someone's blood bag, raising an ungrateful viper without even realizing it." Annie stood in the shadows and her eyes instantly grew dark and unreadable. I strode over, wrapped an arm around Annie's waist, and pulled her protectively into my embrace. Without a trace of politeness, I fired back at the woman. "I'm taking care of my wife because I want to. Who the hell are you? What gives you the right to stick your nose in?" Hearing those words, for the first time ever, Annie's expression management completely failed. She utterly failed to suppress the wildly curling corners of her mouth. I pulled her away, and she followed me into the car with complete compliance. The entire ride, she seemed to still be replaying my words in her head with her head lowered. I frowned at her with a stern expression and scolded. "Someone was pointing right in your face and insulting you, and you don't even know how to fight back." Annie shrugged. Resting her head on one hand, she turned her face sideways to look at me. What came out of her mouth sounded almost like a coquettish complaint. "What can I do? She wasn't exactly wrong. I really am your caged canary. When we got married, you transferred all your shares to me. Right now, in front of me, you're not much different from a canary yourself." I was instantly at a loss for words. Once we got home, I decided it was time to settle this account with her properly. I rolled up my sleeves and walked to the kitchen island, pouring myself a glass of ice water to wet my throat. Annie's gaze followed my movements. Trailing over me faintly, I planted one hand on the counter, caging her in front of me, and loomed over her as I began my interrogation. Don't you think you owe me an explanation? When exactly did I ever force you? With a completely straight face, she spouted utter nonsense. Before you lost your memory. Damn it. I'd nearly forgotten I was still pretending to have amnesia. I pressed my lips together, my brain spinning at top speed, and finally forced out a lie through gritted teeth. Don't try to fool me. I lost my memory, not my intelligence, I asked Xingchen. He said you've always had plenty of freedom, and I never controlled you at all. The warm light from above fell upon Annie, casting a suggestive shadow over her. I had no idea how this sentence suddenly struck a nerve. She raised an eyebrow, and the words that came out carried a chilling edge of obsession. So why didn't you control me then? What? I didn't catch on for a moment. Annie's gaze locked tightly onto me, not missing a single micro-expression on my face. Seeing that I genuinely didn't understand, she finally let out a defeated sigh, seeming somewhat vexed. Never mind. She stopped talking, and we faced off in silence just like that. In the end, I was the one who broke first and took the initiative to walk toward her. As I passed by Annie, she seemed to think I was about to head back to the bedroom to rest and shifted slightly to make way for me. But I came to a stop, barely a fist's distance away from her. I suddenly reached out, grabbed her by the waist, lifted her entire body up, and pressed her against the kitchen island, forcing her to tilt her head up and meet my eyes. At my sudden movement, a brief flash of bewilderment crossed her eyes. But that bewilderment was fleeting and instantly replaced by an undeniable delight and an almost pathological excitement. Annie, I feel like I've come out on the losing end. I stared into her eyes, my voice low. Everyone thinks I'm running some forced love operation, but I clearly haven't done a damn thing. That's not fair. She looked at me, her dark pupils churning with overwhelming sky-covering emotion. The end of her voice curled upward, like an exceedingly dangerous enchantress luring me in. So? I lifted my hand and gently brushed her cheek. The icy touch of my palm made her entire body tremble uncontrollably. My Adam's apple shifted almost imperceptibly, as if I'd been pushed to the very limits of restraint, and she was frantically urging me on with those eyes that seemed to be pulling threads between us. After living over 20 years, this was my first time doing something like this. My heart pounded wildly, out of control, practically about to burst through my ribcage. I frantically psyched myself up inside, and then, eyes shut, resolve steeled, I lunged forward and kissed her, pressing against her lips with desperate, unskilled urgency. Annie was like a traveler who'd been dying of thirst in the desert for far too long and had finally found water. Her palms instantly climbed up my back, traced dangerous paths along my waist, and finally gripped the back of my head, turning the tables and deepening the kiss with aggressive intensity. Even with my head spinning from the kiss, already floating somewhere in the clouds, I still stubbornly clung to my pride. Panting against her lips, I forced out the tough words. Now that's what forcing looks like. Annie licked her reddened, swollen lips with lingering desire, almost seeming a little disappointed by the mere drizzle of what I'd delivered. A low, husky laugh escaped from her throat, a sound so maddeningly flirtatious it was practically foreplay in itself. The temperature of my cheeks kept climbing relentlessly. Finally, I cursed under my breath. I can't outplay her. I absolutely cannot outplay her. Annie, this woman seems to be a genuine freak, completely in a different league from a poser like me. I practically fled in utter defeat. The next day, Xingchen and I sat across from each other at a restaurant, eating crawfish. 2 years. 2 whole years, and your storyline finally switched to the adult channel. Xingchen slammed the table in excitement. God knows, back when I first found out you forced Annie into marrying you, I thought I was finally going to get a feast, get to watch some R-rated drama. Who knew the two of you were driving a baby bus straight into a kindergarten? Xingchen had been rambling non-stop, ever since I told him about last night's first kiss incident. His excited tone was exactly the same as some of the comment sections I'd seen on certain websites. With him going on like this, my thoughts gradually started to wander too. In my mind, I couldn't help but picture the unmentionable advanced version of last night's kiss. I hurriedly shook my head and forcibly dragged the topic back, telling him about the things about Annie that had been striking me as a bit off. Hearing this, Xingchen got even more worked up. You still don't get it? I strongly support you continuing to pretend you're running a forced love scenario, and actually deep down that's what you want too, right? But man, you really are a lucky fool. You stumbled into trying to play the forceful lover, and you ended up provoking a genuine yandere. This trope is just too delicious. I am feasting. I rolled my eyes, feeling there was nothing worth saying to someone who thrived on watching the world burn. After that kiss last night, I'd originally wanted to act like nothing had happened, but Annie clearly had other ideas. She started hovering around me even more aggressively than before, and sometimes her words and implications were deliberately meant to provoke me, forcing me to recall those blush-inducing details. Unfortunately, my self-control was pathetic, and every single time, she managed to tease me until my face burned and I fled in humiliation. To turn the tables, I secretly found a dozen yandere novels and burned the midnight oil, studying them word by word. I refused to believe that my acquired effort couldn't possibly beat her innate talent. I studied with the desperate intensity of someone who ties their hair to the ceiling beam and stabs their thigh to stay awake. I was just about to put my skills to the test when Annie didn't give me the chance. She went on a business trip. Despite her nickname being the Canary, this President Anne was still a big boss, after all, and had to work too. During her trip, Annie did something completely out of character. She started reporting her itinerary to me in excruciating detail. Occasionally I'd reply with a couple of cold words, and she wouldn't even get mad. Something felt off. This was way too inconsistent with her usual boss lady style. While racking my brain over this, a memory suddenly struck my mind like a bolt of lightning. One night, during our first month of marriage, Annie came home at 2 in the morning, dead drunk. I was furious and got into a huge fight with her. Toward the end of the fight, with red eyes, she taunted me. "Lin Bai, if you want me under your watch every second of every day, then go ahead and install surveillance cameras all over the house, if you've got the guts. I've always been someone who can't stand being provoked." The very next day, in a fit of rage, I actually hired people to install cameras in every corner of the house, except the bedroom and bathroom. But soon after they were installed, I regretted it. Since the start of our marriage with Annie had been far from ideal, deep down I still hoped our married life could be healthy and equal. So I had never actually opened that surveillance app. Thinking of this, my scalp instantly went numb, so Annie had done all of that on purpose that night. With trembling hands, I downloaded and opened that surveillance app I'd forgotten about for 2 years. The back-end data showed that the device had a hidden guest account. Over the past 2 years, that account had logged tens of thousands of views, and the most recent login was just 1 minute ago. I froze in place. Slowly, I raised my head and looked at the camera in the upper left corner of the living room, its faint red light blinking. At this very moment, that lens seemed to be silently, eerily staring right at me. Inside, I was roaring like a madman. "Lady, if Annie doesn't go compete for an Oscar in Hollywood, that acting talent of hers is going completely to waste." The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. For 2 years, I'd been watched like a monkey in a zoo. Finally, in a fit of brainless impulse, I came up with an absurdly childish revenge scheme. I opened the short video playlist Jingchen had sent me before, picked out a few of the most scantily clad, thirst-trapping dancing streamers, and deliberately angled my phone screen directly at the camera on the ceiling, turning the video's music volume up to the max thump. Thump! Thump! The pounding music echoed through the living room. The first video hadn't even finished half of its runtime before Annie's video call request started frantically popping up. I pretended not to see it and hung up directly, still watching the videos with feigned enthusiasm. On the other end, it was like she'd gone insane, over a dozen video calls in rapid succession. Finally, just as she was about to completely lose it, I slowly pressed the answer button. "Lin Bai, what the hell are you doing?" Even through the phone screen, I could clearly feel the grinding sound of Annie clenching her back teeth. She sounded like she was genuinely about to explode with rage. I lied through my teeth. "Nothing, I was just asleep." Annie was literally laughed into fury by me. "Asleep? You were asleep and your phone was still playing videos of thirst trap streamers? You just love looking at other women that much?" I put on an expression of extreme shock, abruptly scanned my surroundings, and finally fixed my gaze with pinpoint accuracy on the surveillance camera in the ceiling. My tone was both innocent and outraged. "You're spying on me?" Annie's cold laugh pressed right against my ear, carrying a possessive jealousy that was practically gnashing its teeth. "Those are your cameras for spying on me. I'm just making reasonable use of available resources." I couldn't help it. I rolled my eyes hard at the camera. She really thought I was an idiot, didn't she? From what I know about myself, I'm guessing I've never actually watched the footage. I stared at the phone screen, my voice carrying a hint of provocation. The person on the other end instantly fell silent. She was clearly smiling, but that laugh sent chills down my spine, carrying an eerie, sinister undertone. "Yes. So, why don't you?" There it was again, that damn question. The force of my grip on the phone kept tightening. I lifted my head, and through the empty air, it felt as if I were meeting Annie's gaze through the camera on the ceiling. That day's video call ended on a sour note. She fired off a string of whys at me, and I didn't know how to answer any of them. In the end, she hung up on me one-sidedly. From that day on, Annie stopped sending me her itinerary updates, as if trying to express just how extremely displeased she was, and that wasn't all. That very night, she posted several melancholy heartbreak songs on her moments late into the night. Some people who thrived on drama commented underneath, "Has young Master Lin finally tossed you aside? Or has your spot as the legal wife been challenged by some divine being?" In the past, with Annie's fiery temper, she definitely would have tracked them all down online and fired back one by one. But today, for the first time ever, she chose silence. I let out a cold laugh and, with my very much asking for trouble fingers, gave that post of hers a like. I'd been acting long enough. It was time to close the net. That night, I attended a gathering of childhood friends, all people I'd known since we were kids. I deliberately had Jingchen take a photo of me and another childhood friend, Lin Yue. Jingchen pressed the shutter and handed the phone to me, joking. "You know, you and that girl Lin Yue actually look pretty good together. Back in the day, I really did ship you two." The photo was taken from an incredibly sneaky angle, making the dozen or so centimeters of distance between me and Lin Yue look like we were sitting pressed right up against each other. Before I could even say anything, Lin Yue panicked and rushed to clear her name. "Are you kidding? Don't talk nonsense. Lin Bai's been married for 2 years. If the tigress he's got at home finds out, I'm dead meat." I tugged at the corner of my mouth and handed the phone back to Jingchen. "Do me a favor, post this photo on Moments and set it so only Annie can see it." Pfft. Lin Yue nearly coughed up blood, her face full of terror. "Wait, Lin Bai? I haven't done anything to you, have I? Why are you trying to get me killed?" I glanced at her coolly. "I'll give you the latest Porsche sports car. Lin Yue's mouth snapped shut instantly, and she made a zipping motion across her lips. Jingxin looked somewhat indignant and was just about to protest the unfairness when I preempted his words. That limited edition watch you've been eyeing. It'll be delivered to your place tomorrow. Without another word, Jingxin smoothly hit post to moments. I nodded in satisfaction. After waiting a few hours, the gathering came to an end. I singled out Lin Yue to drive me home. The car pulled up in front of the villa, and I deliberately invited her inside for a bit. Lin Yue shook her head frantically, her refusal resolute. Forget it. I might go in alive, but I can't guarantee I'll come out alive. I smiled somewhat helplessly and watched as she stomped on the gas and fled with visible relief. I pushed open the door. The living room lights were off, but I knew Annie had already come back from her trip ahead of schedule. Faint moonlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows into the living room, and I could vaguely make out a figure sitting upright on the sofa. With a click, I flipped the switch and turned on the light. The sudden harsh brightness made Annie squint with some discomfort. Then she slowly raised her head, her eyes, shot through with dense red veins, fixing themselves on me with an unblinking intensity, and I finally got a clear look at her pale face, as well as the cold gleaming handcuffs and ankle chains lying starkly on the coffee table. My heart skipped a beat, but I still pretended nothing was wrong and walked over. Only when I got closer did I notice the phone with its shattered screen lying discarded at her feet, and her tightly clenched right hand, blood seeping through the gaps between her fingers. How did you get hurt? I frowned and turned to grab the first aid kit to treat her wound. She was uncharacteristically docile, letting me do as I pleased. In that vast house, for a moment, the silence was so absolute that the only sounds were our heavy breathing and chaotic heartbeats. After I finished bandaging her up, I casually asked, "How'd your phone end up smashed?" Annie stared at me dead on, her eyes churning with turbulent, almost annihilating emotions. She didn't answer my question directly. Instead, she suddenly spoke in a hoarse voice. "You never lost your memory at all." My hand, still holding the gauze, froze abruptly. Then, feigning calm, I closed the first aid kit and admitted it without the slightest hesitation. "Yes." She let out a scoff, a sound uglier than crying. With her bandaged hand, she reached out and picked up the handcuffs from the coffee table. That post on Jingxin's Moments. You had him posted on purpose for me to see? Cold sweat had already started beating on my back, but I still forced myself to hold my ground and meet her eyes. That's right. The veins on Annie's pale neck bulged. She took a deep breath and, with extreme difficulty, bit out her final question, word by word. "And tonight, you had that girl drive you home on purpose too?" My palms were already completely soaked with sweat, but I still nodded, utterly candid. I admit it. Annie and I faced each other in a deathly silent stare for several seconds. Then she lowered her head and let out a low laugh. She laughed until her entire chest was shaking, until the corners of her eyes began to burn with a violent red. "Lin Bai, you must be so proud of yourself right now." I frowned and asked back, "What do I have to be proud of?" The smile on her face vanished in an instant. She shot to her feet, handcuffs in hand, and advanced on me step by step, her accusation spilling out in words soaked with blood and tears. "Proud that I clearly fell in love with you ages ago and was still stubbornly refusing to admit it, like a complete fool. Proud that over these 2 years, what I was really angry about wasn't you forcing me to marry you, but the fact that after we got married, you did absolutely nothing. Proud that when I found out you'd been in a car accident and thought you were about to die, the only thing I could think was, if you die, I won't live either. Even as a ghost, I'll bind myself to you and never let go." Her eyes had reddened into wide rings, and the tears she'd been holding back for so long were now spinning wildly at the rims. Watching her advance on me with those handcuffs, I didn't step back even half a step. "Annie." I cut through her emotional breakdown, my voice low and dangerous. "I'm giving you one last chance to reorganize your words." She froze abruptly, barely half a step away from me. The scalding tears finally broke free and streaked down her cheeks. Her hand, holding the cuffs, struggled and wavered in the air for a few seconds. Then, with trembling hands, she raised them, click, and locked one end of the handcuffs tightly around her own wrist, before holding the other end out before me in utter supplication. "Lin Bai." Her voice quivered, thick with a nasal sob as she pleaded with me. "Don't leave me." The truth is, ever since the surveillance camera incident, I'd spent a long time thinking, and I finally figured out why, on that night during our first month of marriage, Annie had suddenly gotten dead drunk and completely lost her composure. It was because that evening, she must have coincidentally seen me having dinner with Lin Yue. Later, I specifically went to Lin Yue to verify this, and she poured out her grievances to me. "Don't even bring it up. The very next day, out of nowhere, I got an anonymous warning from your wife. If it weren't for your sake, I genuinely think she would have stuffed me in a sack and beaten me half to death." Connecting all the clues together, I finally pieced together why our relationship had twisted into such a distorted shape over these 2 years. Because of the way I'd exploited her family's crisis and forced her into marriage, I'd been racked with guilt toward Annie. I thought she utterly hated me, despised me. So out of respect for her, I'd been painfully restraining myself, struggling to maintain a polite, arm's-length distance. But Annie took my restraint and respect as a sign that, once I'd gotten what I wanted, I no longer treasured her, or even didn't like her at all. I was too proud as a man to swallow my dignity and coax her, and she was too proud to set aside her self-esteem and admit she'd fallen first. And so the misunderstandings piled up, the path grew more and more crooked, until it finally devolved into this mutual torture between two obsessive lunatics. But luckily, the provocation tactic worked on me, and of course, it worked on Annie too. So I deliberately let her see that intimate photo, deliberately let her see Lin Yue drive me home. And as it turned out, the effect of this heavy dose of medicine was astonishingly effective. Right here, right now, she had finally shed every last layer of pretense and defense, and handed over everything, along with herself, whole and complete, to me. Tears still marked Annie's face, and the light in her eyes flickered between brightness and darkness through the moisture, carrying a fragility that was utterly heartbreaking. A sharp ache stabbed through my heart. Without a word, I strode forward, directly locked the other end of the handcuffs onto my own wrist, and then fiercely pulled her into my arms, wrapping my arms tightly around her waist. Annie's body trembled slightly. She obediently buried her head against my chest, and her tears quickly soaked through my shirt. "Don't you have anything else you want to ask me?" I gently stroked her back. Annie didn't speak. She only held me tighter, as if she wanted to melt herself into my very bones and blood. Finally, with all the strength she had, she shook her head fiercely against my chest. I sighed, pulled back slightly from her embrace, cupped her face in my hands, and looked at her with an expression of utmost seriousness and gravity. "But I have something to say to you." Annie tensed up instantly and instinctively grasped my hand in return, seeking a sense of safety. Word by word, with absolute sincerity, I looked into her eyes. "Annie, I like you. I should have said this to you back when I fell for you at first sight and went to confess, back when I stopped at nothing to force you into marrying me. I'm sorry for making you wait this long." In an instant, a blinding, overwhelming joy erupted in Annie's once dim eyes. She rose onto her tiptoes and began kissing my cheeks, my lips again and again in a frenzy, repeating over and over the words that were 2 years overdue. "Lin Bai, I love you, I love you." And from there, everything spiraled completely out of control. At the height of passion, she used those handcuffed hands to lock them tightly around my neck. The rims of her eyes flushed red. Like an obsessive queen, she kept demanding that I repeat her words. "Lin Bai, say you were drawn to me by my looks. I was drawn to you by your looks. Say you seized me by force and plunder. Say you love me. I love you, only you."